I'm 54 years old, and for most of my life I've spent my time being what people might call the responsible one, the dependable one, the woman who played by the rules. I married young, raised 2 daughters who are now raising children of their own, worked a quiet part-time job at the local library, and believed that love was something you built over time, like a sturdy brick house, not something you felt in a sudden dizzying rush or under strange and unexpected circumstances. I believed in the calm predictability of a life well lived. I thought I had seen it all. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that afternoon. I never thought something like this could happen to me, a woman in the quiet autumn of her life. I'm telling you this story as a warning, and perhaps as a strange kind of hope. Please don't make the same mistake I did and assume that your story is already over. This is a story about a moment. A single accidental moment that cracked open a part of me I thought had been sealed shut forever. It's about the surprising, terrifying, and beautiful discovery that even after a lifetime you can still be seen. Before we step into this story with me, I want to invite you to join our community. If you believe in stories that explore the quiet, often overlooked moments that change our lives forever, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. It means the world to us and allows us to continue sharing these truths with you. It had been a long, draining week, and I was house-sitting for my best friend Karen while she and her husband were away on a much-needed anniversary trip to Hawaii. She'd asked me to check in on her beautiful sun-drenched California home, water the jungle of plants she nurtured with a fierce love, and feed their goofy golden retriever Toby. It was a simple enough task. Her 17-year-old son Ben was supposed to be staying over at a friend's house for the entire weekend, so I had the house completely to myself. Karen's place always made me feel a little nostalgic. It had high ceilings, that warm, honeyed California light that always seemed to be slipping in through the kitchen windows, and the intoxicating scent of jasmine from the massive bushes that grew just outside the back door. It was a house that felt alive, a stark contrast to the quiet stillness of my own empty nest. I'd taken a long walk with Toby along the dusty trails that snaked through the hills behind their neighborhood, feeling the late afternoon sun warming my shoulders a comfortable sleepy heat. By the time we returned, I was coated in a light film of sweat and trail dust. The house was quiet, peaceful, a sanctuary. I kicked off my sneakers by the door, my socks peeling off with a satisfying tug, and unbuttoned my shirt on the way to the guest bathroom. The thought of a long, hot shower was pure bliss. The hot water felt heavenly against my tired muscles, like a well-deserved reward. I tilted my head back, letting the spray soak through my hair, enjoying the rare, luxurious silence and the thick steam curling around me. It's rare these days at my age to feel that kind of complete and total privacy, that kind of uninterrupted stillness. In my own home, the silence often felt heavy, filled with the ghosts of what used to be the laughter of my daughters, the familiar presence of my late husband Dan. But here in Karen's house, the silence was just quiet. It was a blank canvas. I didn't hear the front door open or the soft, familiar creak of the floorboards in the hallway. I was reaching for the bottle of conditioner, my eyes closed against the water, lost in my own world when the bathroom door creaked open. I froze. A sudden cold jolt of adrenaline shot through me, a stark contrast to the warmth of the shower. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The water was still running a loud, steady drum, and my eyes blinked against the fogged-up glass of the shower door. And then I saw his shadow. A tall, masculine silhouette blurred and indistinct through the steam and the frosted glass. "Hello?" I called out, my voice more annoyed than afraid, my first thought being that maybe Karen and her husband had come home early without telling me. I wasn't expecting company. There was a sharp, sudden pause from the other side of the door. Then a voice, low, uncertain, and mortified. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here. It was Ben. Karen's 17-year-old son. My stomach dropped a leaden weight plummeting through me. He was standing just outside the glass, having walked into what he assumed was his empty home, only to find his mom's best friend in the shower. I instinctively crossed my arms over my chest, a useless gesture behind the opaque glass, and my other hand fumbled for the towel hanging over the top of the door. "It's okay, Ben," I shouted over the sound of the water, trying to sound calm. Unbothered the way a responsible adult should, but my voice cracked a little on his name. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Rachel," he stammered, his voice a jumble of panic. "I didn't. I'll just... sorry." His voice disappeared down the hallway, followed by the sound of his bedroom door shutting with a soft click. I stood there under the running water, my heart pounding in my chest. The air in the small, steamy bathroom felt hotter than before, suffocating. A part of me, the largest part, was completely, utterly embarrassed. Another part was oddly rattled, shaken by the unexpected intrusion. And then there was another part, a smaller, quieter part that I wasn't ready to acknowledge, a part that felt something else entirely. Something I hadn't felt in years. A strange, unwelcome, and undeniable flicker of awareness. When I finally turned off the water and stepped out wrapped tightly, securely in the thickest towel I could find, I could hear Ben moving around in the kitchen. It was awkward, yes. Uncomfortable, absolutely. But he hadn't seen anything, not really. Just a blurry shape behind frosted glass, and I didn't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it already was. Still, something had shifted in the quiet atmosphere of the house. I dried off quickly, my hands trembling slightly, and changed into a loose, comfortable t-shirt and a pair of old worn-in jeans before stepping out of the bathroom to face him. Ben was standing by the refrigerator, a bottle of soda in his hand, his eyes firmly fixed on the linoleum floor. "I thought you were staying at Connor's tonight," I said gently, trying to keep my voice light to inject some normalcy back into the air. "I was," he muttered, still not looking at me. "But his mom had some family emergency and kicked us all out. I didn't know you were going to be here. Mom just said you'd be checking on Toby." We both stood there for a second that stretched on for too long, caught in a kind of suspended mutual discomfort. "It's fine, really," I said, forcing a small laugh. "Just a little surprise, that's all." He looked up at me finally, his cheeks flushed a deep, embarrassed red. You're not mad?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not mad, but maybe let's knock next time." That made him laugh, a short, nervous sound, and the tension in the room broke just a little. We moved on, or we tried to anyway. I decided the best way to handle the lingering awkwardness was to just act normal, to create a new shared experience to plaster over the old one. I made dinner for the two of us. Pasta, something simple and comforting. Ben offered to help, and I let him chop the garlic, mostly just to give him something to do with his hands, something to focus on other than the memory of my silhouette behind the shower door. I kept catching him glancing at me, then quickly looking away, his ears turning red. And I couldn't help but notice it. Not because it made me uncomfortable, though maybe a part of me thought it should have, but because for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it made me feel something. Seen. We ate in the dim golden light of Karen's dining room, Toby curled up happily under the table at our feet, and the warm summer night pressed softly against the windows. I listened to Ben talk about school, about his friends, about how senior year felt like both a finish line and a terrifying cliff's edge all at once. He was more thoughtful, more articulate than I remembered. He was taller, his shoulders broader, his features sharper, older. He was no longer the lanky, goofy kid who used to splash me at their pool parties. He was becoming a man. And there was a moment, fleeting, but undeniably real, when our eyes met across the table and lingered for just a beat too long. A quiet acknowledgement of the strange new awareness that now existed between us. I was the one who looked away first. After dinner, I cleaned up while Ben went upstairs. He said he was going to play video games, and I told myself that this was just a blip. An awkward misunderstanding that we would both soon forget. But when I went to bed that night in the quiet guest room, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake for hours listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of Karen's house, the low hum of the refrigerator, the occasional sigh of the wind through the open window. But mostly, I listened to the thoughts racing through my own head. Thoughts I didn't want to have. What was I doing? Why was I feeling this strange flutter in my chest? Why did I feel so visible? I told myself to forget it, to move on, to be the responsible 54-year-old woman I was supposed to be. But some lines, once they have been brushed against, no matter how lightly, never quite disappear. They leave a faint, shimmering trace, a reminder of a path not taken, a feeling not explored. And I was afraid of what that trace might lead to. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual after the kind of restless, shallow half-sleep that never really lets you settle. The sun was already peeking through the blinds, striping the guest room walls in pale, dusty gold. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts still heavy with the memory of the night before. It was just a moment, I told myself again, a mantra against the rising tide of confusion. A few awkward seconds. I'm overthinking it. Still, when I padded into the kitchen and saw Ben already there pouring cereal into a bowl, I felt that quiet, unnerving flutter in my chest again. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt, his dark hair still tousled from sleep, and he looked up with a kind of hesitant smile when he saw me. "Morning," he said, his voice a little gravelly with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. I busied myself with the coffee pot, needing the familiar ritual to ground me. "You're up early." "Didn't sleep much," he admitted, his gaze dropping back to his cereal bowl. "Yeah," I said, softly pouring water into the machine. "Me neither." For a moment, we just stood there in a charged silence, the only sound the clink of his spoon in the bowl. Then I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him at the kitchen nook, cradling my empty mug in both hands. I knew we couldn't just ignore it. "I guess we should talk about yesterday," I said, deciding to face it head on. Ben glanced up, his eyes wide for a second, then he nodded. "Yeah. Look, Rachel, I'm really, really sorry. I swear I didn't mean to—" "I know," I said quickly, holding up a hand to stop his flood of apologies. "I know you didn't. It was just unexpected, that's all." He nodded again, his cheeks coloring with that same boyish blush from the night before. "I thought the house was empty. I wouldn't have just—" "You don't have to explain," I interrupted gently. "I'm not upset, just surprised, that's all." The truth was, I wasn't even sure what I wanted from this conversation. Closure, reassurance. Or maybe I wanted to read his face again, to see if that strange electric moment we had shared had meant something to him too, even if it wasn't supposed to. Ben finished his cereal and got up to rinse the bowl in the sink. I stayed seated, sipping my now brewing coffee, watching him from the corner of my eye. He moved with a kind of quiet, contained energy. He wasn't the lanky, awkward teenager I remembered from just a year ago, but he wasn't quite a man yet either. He was somewhere in between a beautiful, confusing, and dangerous territory. And maybe that's what made everything feel so uncertain, so fragile. Later that afternoon, we both found ourselves outside in the backyard. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the backyard shimmered in that way. Only Southern California summer afternoons do golden slow, and filled with the scent of warm grass and chlorine from the neighbor's pool. I was kneeling on the patio, pruning the dead leaves from Karen's collection of potted succulents, when Ben came out and sat on the patio steps, stretching out his long legs. Toby was chasing bees in the corner of the yard, happy and completely oblivious to the quiet storm brewing between the two humans in his charge. Ben cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something?" I turned slightly toward him, shielding my eyes from the sun with my hand. "Of course. Have you ever done something that felt wrong, but also kind of right at the same time?" The question landed like a stone in the quiet pool of my chest. I blinked my mind, reeling. That's a complicated question, Ben." He looked away out across the yard, picking at a loose thread on the hem of his shorts. "You don't have to answer." "No, it's okay," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. I think everyone feels that at some point in their lives. The world isn't always black and white. Sometimes we step into the gray areas without even meaning to." He nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah, that's what it feels like. Like I didn't plan it, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There it was. The unspoken finally spoken. He hadn't just seen a blurry silhouette. He had seen me. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I stayed composed. "Ben." I started, but he cut me off. "I'm not saying anything has to happen," he said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I know I'm just a kid to you. I know." "You're not." I cut in, my voice more forceful than I intended, then softer. "You're not just a kid, and that's part of the problem." He turned to me, then his eyes searching mine, his expression a mixture of confusion and a desperate, hopeful plea. "Then what is it?" I took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the moment of my 54 years pressing down on my chest. It's everything. The timing, the situation, your mom, my best friend, my age, your age. He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile that seemed too old for his years. You're not old. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Tell that to my niece in the morning. Age doesn't change what you feel, he said, his voice almost a whisper. And for the first time, I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him he was confused. I didn't remind him of the consequences or the boundaries. Because deep down, a secret, treacherous part of me wanted to believe him. We sat there in a profound silence for a long while, the sun warming our skin, the wind brushing past like it was trying to carry the impossible moment away. Eventually, he stood up and walked back inside without another word. And I stayed on that patio, staring at the potted plants in front of me, my hands still covered in dirt, wondering when everything in my quiet, orderly life had gotten so incredibly complicated. I had come here to feed the dog and water the plants, but now something else had been planted. Something unexpected. Something I wasn't sure I had the strength or the will to ignore. The next few days passed in a quiet, tense rhythm that neither of us dared to disrupt. We went about the routines of house-sitting, feeding, Toby making simple meals, occasionally crossing paths in the hallway, or lingering a little too long over the breakfast table. But the air between us had fundamentally changed. There was something unsaid hanging there like the last words of a song echoing long after the music has stopped. I kept telling myself that I was being ridiculous, that this was just a strange fluke of timing and emotion. I was a grown woman, for heaven's sake. I had lived through a marriage, childbirth, the raising of 2 children, the heartbreak of my husband's death, and the long, quiet years of widowhood. Whatever was stirring inside me now, it had to be a passing thing. Hormones, loneliness, a simple mistake in judgment, but it didn't pass. Not completely. One evening, just as the sky was turning that dusky, magical lavender color that always reminds me of my own childhood summers, the power went out. I was in the kitchen preparing a simple salad for dinner when everything suddenly went black and silent except for Toby's startled bark from the backyard and the low hum of the cooling night air through the open windows. A moment later, I heard Ben's voice from upstairs. Everything okay down there?" "Power's out," I called back. "Must be the transformer again. Your mom mentioned it acts up sometimes in the summer." A few minutes later, he came down the stairs, the beam of his phone's flashlight preceding him, along with 2 battery-powered lanterns. He set one on the kitchen counter and the other in the living room, bathing the spaces in a soft, flickering, intimate glow. "I guess this means no TV tonight," he joked, and I could tell he was trying to lighten the mood to bring things back to a neutral, safe ground. I smiled, grateful for the effort. "Guess it's back to the Stone Age. We might have to actually talk to each other." We ended up sitting in the living room each with a glass of lemonade, the flickering light from the lantern casting long dancing shadows on the walls. There was something incredibly intimate about it all, as if the universe had intentionally pulled the plug on the rest of the world to leave us in this strange, glowing stillness. Ben shifted beside me on the couch. "Can I ask you something again?" he said, his voice quiet in the darkness. I nodded slowly, my own voice a near whisper. "You can ask me anything, Ben." He took a breath. "Why do you look so sad sometimes, when you're not saying anything when you think no one is looking?" The question caught me completely off guard. I blinked, staring into the depths of my lemonade glass. "No one's ever asked me that," I murmured. "Not even my ex-husband, not even Dan." I paused, the admission hanging in the air. I guess I've just gotten good at keeping things quiet. For years I've been needed, as a mother, a friend, a wife, but somewhere along the way, I think I stopped being wanted. I hadn't meant to say that last part. It just slipped out a raw, honest truth, carried by the flicker of vulnerability that the darkness had allowed. Ben's voice when he finally spoke was so soft it was almost a part of the silence. "I see you." The words weren't romantic. They weren't even meant to be seductive. But they landed deep in that hollow, forgotten part of me that hadn't been touched in years. I looked over at him, at his young face illuminated by the soft flickering light. His face was still boyish in some ways, smooth skin, hopeful eyes. But there was something else there now. A quiet resolve. a profound understanding that seemed far beyond his years. "Ben," I said gently, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name, already trying to find the exit to whatever door was creaking open between us. He leaned forward just slightly. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, Rachel. I don't want you to feel invisible." Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked at the corners of my eyes. I wasn't sure if it was what he had said, or the simple, devastating way he had said it. Maybe it was both. Maybe it had just been too long since someone had looked at me and truly seen me without obligation or history clouding the lens. I set my glass down on the coffee table. "This can't happen." I whispered the words, a desperate plea to him, to myself, to the universe. He just nodded. "I know." We sat there just inches apart, breathing in the quiet storm we had both stumbled into. Then, without thinking, without conscious decision, I reached out and touched his hand. Just briefly. A light brush of my fingertips against his. It was meant to be a thank you, a goodbye. But in that small electric moment, everything inside me shifted again. I pulled my hand away quickly and stood up, the sudden movement, awkward in the small space. I should go to bed," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Long day." He stood up too, watching me with an unreadable expression. "Good night, Rachel." My name on his lips sounded different now. It wasn't just a label, it was a connection. "Good night, Ben," I replied, and I slipped down the hallway to the safety of the guest room, my heart pounding like a frantic drum against my chest. Inside the room, I leaned against the door after closing it behind me, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The lantern's glow cast my faint reflection against the dark window. What had I done? What was I doing? This wasn't the life I had planned. But in that house, in that heat, in that strange, suspended pocket of time, something was happening. And no matter how many times I told myself to stop it, to shut it down, it was still there, a quiet, persistent pulse underneath everything, and I didn't know how to make it go away. The morning after the power outage, the house felt unusually still. The air was heavy, not just with the promise of another hot summer day, but with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid the night before. I moved quietly through the kitchen, making coffee, half expecting Ben to appear, half hoping he wouldn't. I needed time. I needed space. I needed clarity. As the familiar, comforting smell of coffee filled the room, I stared out the kitchen window, watching Toby chase birds across the sun-drenched yard. A version of me, the version from a week ago, might have smiled at the simple, joyful sight. But not today. Today I felt too full, too aware of the fragile, dangerous edges I'd let myself lean against. I heard his footsteps on the stairs before I saw him. He entered the kitchen slowly, barefoot, his hair still messy from sleep, his eyes hesitant. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We stood there in a charged silence for a moment, just sipping from our mugs. The gap between us felt like a physical entity now, like something sacred and dangerous had passed through it and changed its very nature. "I wanted to say something," he began, his voice low, "but I don't want to make things worse." "Then say it gently," I replied, my own voice a near whisper. He looked at me, then really looked at me, his gaze steady and serious. "I know this. Whatever this is, it can't last. I get that. I'm not naive. But I'll never forget what happened here. What you gave me." I swallowed hard against the lump that had formed in my throat. "I didn't give you anything, Ben." "You gave me a moment," he said, his voice full of a quiet conviction. "A real one. In a world where most people just look past you or through you. You didn't." His words struck a place in me I didn't even know was still sore. I set my cup down and sat at the table, not trusting my voice just yet. He joined me, his hands folded on the table in front of him like he was praying. "You're right," I said after a long, difficult pause. "It was a moment, and maybe it meant different things to both of us. But you have your whole life ahead of you, Ben. You need to be out there experiencing things, learning, loving people your own age. People who can walk beside you without second-guessing every single step." He nodded slowly, his gaze lowered to his folded hands. "You made me feel seen." I continued the confession, both a relief and a burden. And I won't lie, there was a part of me that needed that more than I even realized. But it's my job as the adult in this situation to know where the line is, and not to cross it. He looked up, his eyes slightly misty but steady. You didn't cross it. Maybe not, I said, but I came too close. We sat in a quiet, shared understanding again, letting the truth of the situation settle in between us. The clock on the wall ticked on, steady and indifferent. When my mom gets back tomorrow, he said, his voice soft, I won't tell her anything. I wanted you to know that you're important, that you matter to me. I smiled, a real smile this time, though it was tinged with a deep, profound ache. Thank you. After breakfast, we went our separate ways within the house. I spent the afternoon folding towels and tidying up Karen's already immaculate home, wiping down counters that were already clean, as if I could scrub away the emotions that clung to the air. He stayed upstairs, the low murmur of music coming from behind his closed door. That evening, I stood in the hallway outside his door for a few long moments, unsure of why I was even there. I didn't knock. I just placed a small, folded note under the edge of the door and walked away. Inside was a simple message. Some moments are meant to be memories, not destinations. Thank you for seeing me. Be good to yourself, Ben. I didn't see him again that night. The next morning, I left before Karen and her husband were due to return. I packed my small overnight bag quietly, gave Toby a long, heartfelt goodbye rub behind the ears, and locked the door behind me, the sound of the bolt sliding into place feeling strangely final. The drive home was slow, thoughtful. I watched the trees blur past, the sunlight flickering between them like blinking, fleeting thoughts. It's strange how life gives you these brief, unexpected intersections, a flicker of profound connection where you least expect it. And even though nothing had happened, not really, not in the way the world defines it, something had changed. Not just in him. In me. I had spent so many years being careful, being quiet, playing the role that was expected of me. But in that short, strange span of days, I remembered something vital. I was still here. I was still alive. I was still capable of being moved. That didn't mean I would go out and chase something reckless or confuse a fleeting, impossible moment with a lasting bond. But it did mean that I would stop hiding behind the woman I used to be. It meant that I would start listening to the quiet voice inside me again, the one that had gone silent for far too long. Life isn't just about keeping everything in order. Sometimes it's about allowing a single unexpected moment to wake you up, and then having the courage to walk forward, wiser, fuller, and completely, utterly unashamed.